phone buzzed on the glass coffee table, a sharp vibration that sliced through the stillness of Sarah Thompson's Santa Monica apartment. Outside, the November sunset painted the Pacific horizon in bruised purples and fading golds, the kind of fleeting beauty that made you forget Los Angeles could be cruel. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with the scent of chamomile tea gone cold. Sarah, 56, sat rigid on her cream linen sofa, her fingers tracing the edge of a financial statement, $800,000, 0 cents, the payout from a city redevelopment project that had swallowed her old Echo Park house, a house she'd clawed her way to own, only to have it taken by eminent domain. A victory, yes, but one that tasted like ash after 28 years of surviving on her own. The phone buzzed again, insistent, like a wasp trapped in a jar. Sarah glanced at the screen, and her heart lurched. James Thompson, Jimmy, her son, the name she hadn't seen on her phone in 28 years, not since he was 3, when his small hands clung to her neck before being ripped away. She froze, her breath shallow, as if moving might shatter the moment. Why now? After decades of silence, not a birthday card, not a Mother's Day call, not even a whisper to check if she was still breathing. Her thumb hovered over the answer button, torn between hope and dread. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in, the hum of the city outside fading to a dull roar. He pressed answer. "Mom?" Jimmy's voice crackled through, warm, almost too warm, like a radio host selling a dream. "Hey, it's me. Been a while, huh? I was thinking, Thanksgiving's coming up. Why don't you come home? The whole family's waiting." Sarah's grip tightened on the phone, her knuckles whitening. "Home!" The word landed like a slap. There was no home, not after what they'd done. She leaned back, her gray eyes narrowing as she stared at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Santa Monica Pier glowed faintly in the distance, its Ferris wheel spinning slowly, a mocking reminder of cycles that never stopped. Jimmy's tone was rehearsed, polished, the kind of cheer you'd hear from a car salesman closing a deal. This wasn't her son. This was a stranger wearing his voice. "Jimmy," she said, her voice steady but edged with ice, "what do you want?" A pause, just long enough to confirm her suspicion. Then he laughed, a little too loud. "Come on, Mom, don't be like that. I just thought it'd be nice to reconnect. Dad says we can put the past behind us. Spending the holidays alone in that fancy apartment? That's just sad." Sarah's lips curled into a bitter smile. Fancy apartment. So that was it. The $800,000, 0 cents. She'd read about the Echo Park redevelopment in the LA Times, a sprawling urban renewal project that had turned her crumbling one-bedroom house into a check. Word must have spread, slithering its way to Jimmy wherever he'd been hiding for 28 years. She stood, pacing to the window, her reflection a ghostly outline against the woman staring back was weathered but unbowed. Short silver hair, a tailored blazer, eyes like steel forged in fire. She wasn't the broken girl David had thrown out all those years ago. She was Sarah Thompson, survivor, self-made, and nobody's fool. "Jimmy," she said, her voice low, cutting, "let's not play games. You heard about the payout, didn't you? The redevelopment money." Another pause, this one heavier, laced with discomfort. "Mom, no, it's not like that," he stammered, the warmth in his tone fraying. Okay, look, my fiancé and I are trying to buy a place. The housing market's brutal, you know? If you could help us out just a little, it'd mean everything." There it was, the truth, naked and shameless. Sarah let out a soft, hollow laugh, the sound echoing in the quiet apartment. Her chest tightened, not with sadness but with rage, a deep smoldering fury that had simmered for decades. She turned from the window, her gaze falling on a framed photo on the bookshelf, a younger Sarah holding a toddler Jimmy, both smiling under a Pasadena oak tree. That Sarah was gone, buried under years of betrayal, and survival. This Sarah owed Jimmy nothing. "Help you?" she said, her voice now a blade. "Jimmy, when was the last time you called me, checked if I was alive? 28 years, and now you remember you have a mother because my bank account got fatter?" "Mom, don't be harsh," he snapped, impatience creeping in. "I'm trying here. You help us with the down payment, and I swear I'll visit all the time." Sarah's blood ran cold. She sank onto the sofa, her free hand pressing against her temple. "Let me be clear," she said, each word deliberate, final. "Not a single cent of that money is yours. I earned it. I survived. You don't get to swoop in now and claim it." "Mom, I'm your son," he shouted, his voice cracking with entitlement. "How can you do this to me? Where were you when I needed a son?" Sarah's voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of 28 years. "When I had nothing, no one. You don't get to use that word now. Keep dreaming, Jimmy. You and your father get nothing." She hung up, the phone clattering onto the table. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the storm raging inside her. Tears burned her eyes, not for Jimmy, but for the foolish part of her that had hoped, for one fleeting second, that his call meant something real. She pressed her palms to her face, willing the tears back, but they came anyway. Hot, silent, unstoppable. The city outside hummed on, indifferent, as Sarah sat alone, the weight of her past crashing over her like a tidal wave. The phone rang again an hour later, just as Sarah poured herself a glass of Merlot. Trying to steady her nerves, she glanced at the screen. David Thompson, her ex-husband, the man who'd shattered her life 28 years ago. Her pulse quickened, a mix of dread and defiance. She'd known this was coming. Jimmy's call was just the opening act. David, always the puppet master, would be pulling the strings. She sipped the wine, letting it burn her throat, then pressed answer. "Sarah." David's voice slithered through, soft and syrupy, the same tone he'd used to charm her decades ago. "It's been too long. I know we've had our differences, but we're still family, right? Jimmy's getting married. Maybe you could chip in, help him buy a house." Sarah's laugh was cold, sharp, cutting through his words like a knife. "David, you've got some nerve. Who threw me out of our home 28 years ago? Who took my son and slammed the door in my face? And now, what? You think I'm your ATM because I got a payout?" His tone shifted, the charm replaced by a familiar edge. "Sarah, that was ages ago. Why drag it up? You're not getting any younger. What do you need all that money for? Be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Sarah's voice rose, steady but lethal. "You haven't changed, still shameless. Listen closely, David, because I'm only saying this once. You get nothing, not a penny. Don't call me again." She hung up, her heart pounding. The wineglass shook in her hand, the red liquid sloshing against the rim. She set it down, her breath ragged, and leaned back, closing her eyes. The past wasn't just a memory. It was a living thing, clawing its way back, demanding to be faced. And in that moment, Sarah was 28 again, kneeling on the wet steps of their Pasadena home, rain soaking through her thin jacket, her screams drowned by the storm. It was February 1997, a night so cold it bit into her bones. Sarah, then 28, pounded on the front door of the Craftsman house she'd once called home, her fists raw, her voice hoarse. Inside, David stood in the doorway, holding 3-year-old Jemmy, whose tiny face was buried in his father's shoulder. David's expression was blank, unyielding, a mask of contempt. "You're useless, Sarah," he said, his voice flat like he was reading a grocery list. "You can't even take care of a child. You're out. Don't come back. You'll never see him again." Sarah's knees buckled, the wet concrete bruising her skin as she sank to the ground. "David, please," she sobbed, rain mingling with tears. "You cheated. You betrayed me. Why are you doing this?" "He's my son." "Put in." He scoffed, his lip curling. "Look at you. A mess. Always nagging, always whining. You brought this on yourself." Then he slammed the door, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Sarah screamed, pounding the wood until her hands bled, but no one answered. The rain poured harder, drenching her, chilling her to the core. She was alone, cast out like trash, her child stolen, her life erased. The memory dissolved, leaving Sarah gasping in her Santa Monica apartment. She stood, pacing, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. That night had been the start of everything. 28 years of clawing her way back from nothing. She'd moved to Echo Park, a gritty neighborhood where dreams went to die. No money, no degree, no family, just desperation. She'd washed dishes at a greasy diner on Sunset Boulevard, her hands perpetually chapped, the stench of fryer oil clinging to her skin. She'd delivered takeout on a battered bike, dodging traffic in the dark, praying for tips to cover rent. She'd scrubbed floors in mansions where owners wouldn't meet her eyes, their whispers trailing her like shadows. She's the one who lost her kid. What kind of mother is that? Sarah stopped pacing, her gaze settling on a small, chipped mug on the counter. A relic from those early days, one of the few things she'd kept. It was a reminder of how low she'd fallen and how far she'd climbed. But the climb hadn't been linear. There were nights she'd curled up on a thin mattress in a roach-infested apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering if survival was worth it. There were days she'd stood outside Jimmy's school, hoping for a glimpse, only to be turned away by David's mother, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're not family anymore. Stay away from him." And then there was Linda Carter. Sarah's lips softened into a faint smile at the thought of Linda, the woman who'd saved her, when she had nothing but shattered pride. It was 1998, a year after the divorce, in a dark alley behind the diner. Sarah, exhausted after a 12-hour shift, was cornered by 3 drunk men, their slurred taunts growing uglier by the second. One grabbed her arm, his fingers bruising, and Sarah fought back, kicking, clawing, but she was no match. She hit the pavement, her elbows splitting open, pain shooting through her. She thought it was over, that her story would end there, in the filth of an Echo Park alley. "Get your hands off her!" The voice was thunder, fierce and fearless. Linda Carter, a 40-something firecracker who lived down the hall, came charging down the alley, wielding a broom like a sword. Her curly black hair bounced as she swung, her shouts louder than the men's fists. They scattered, cursing, too startled to fight back. Linda knelt beside Sarah, her brown eyes blazing. "You okay, hun? Come on, let's get you cleaned up." That night, Linda didn't just save Sarah's life. She gave her a reason to keep living. Over cups of instant coffee in Linda's cramped apartment, she listened as Sarah poured out her pain, the divorce, the custody loss, the shame. Linda didn't pity her. She leaned forward, her voice firm. "You don't get to give up, Sarah. You hear me? You've got to live better than they ever thought you could. Screw David, screw the whispers. You're stronger than this." Sarah clung to those words like a lifeline. Linda became her rock, bringing her meals after long shifts, sitting with her when words failed, never letting her sink too deep into despair. She was there when Sarah enrolled in community college, cheering her on as she studied late into the night. She was there when Sarah landed her first real job, a low-paid gig at a trading firm, and celebrated with cheap wine and laughter. Linda was the one who reminded Sarah she wasn't defined by her losses. She was defined by what she did next. Back in the present, Sarah's phone buzzed again. A text from Linda. "Heard about Jimmy's call. You okay? Don't let that snake slither back in." Sarah smiled faintly, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I'm fine. They're not getting a dime." She hit send, then set the phone down, her mind racing. Jimmy's call wasn't just a betrayal, it was a threat. The $800,000 0 cents wasn't just money, it was her lifeline, her reward for 28 years of blood and sweat. She'd planned to use it to expand her company, ST Global Trade, maybe even buy a small beach house in Malibu for retirement. But now Jimmy and David were circling like vultures, their fake warmth masking greed. Sarah knew their game. David had always been a manipulator, charming his way through life, using money and lies to get what he wanted. And Jimmy, he'd learned from the best, it seemed. She walked to her desk, pulling out a legal pad and a pen. Her mind was clear now, the rage sharpening her focus. She wouldn't let them win, not again. She jotted down a name, Rebecca Stein, a top-tier estate attorney she'd met at a women's business conference. Tomorrow she'd call Rebecca, draft a will, and lock her assets away from Jimmy and David forever. She'd built her life from nothing, and she'd protect it with everything she had. But as she wrote, the memory of that rainy night in Pasadena crept back, unbidden. Jimmy's tiny voice calling Mama as David carried him inside, the sound of the door slamming, final, absolute. Sarah's pen paused, her throat tightening. She had lost so much that night. Her son, her home, her identity. And for what? Because David had cheated? Because he'd decided she wasn't enough? The injustice of it burned even now, a wound that had never fully healed. He pushed the pad aside and stood, walking to the balcony. The ocean breeze was cool, carrying the faint salt of the Pacific. Below, Santa Monica buzzed with life. Couples strolling, street performers strumming guitars, the pier's lights twinkling. Sarah leaned against the railing, her silver hair catching the wind. She was a long way from the girl who'd knelt in the rain, begging for her son. She'd built a company, a legacy, a life. But the ache for Jimmy, for the boy he'd been, lingered like a bruise. The phone buzzed again, another text from Linda. You're stronger than they know, don't forget it. Sarah nodded to herself, her jaw tightening. Linda was right. She wasn't that broken girl anymore. She was Sarah Thompson, and she'd fight to keep what was hers, her money, her peace, her truth. Jimmy and David thought they could guilt her, manipulate her, but they'd underestimated her. This was just the beginning, and Sarah was ready for war. The Santa Monica sunrise was a lie, a soft pink glow that promised peace but delivered none. Sarah Thompson stood on her balcony, clutching a chipped mug of black coffee, the steam curling like ghosts in the November chill. Below, the Pacific Ocean churned, its waves crashing against the shore with a rhythm that matched the chaos in her chest. Jimmy's call last night had ripped open a wound she'd spent 28 years stitching shut. His voice, so casual, so entitled, echoed in her mind. Mom, I'm your son. How can you do this to me? And then David, her ex-husband, with his slimy charm, daring to ask for her money, the $800,000, 0 cents from the Echo Park redevelopment, wasn't just a windfall. It was her lifeline, her proof of survival, and they thought they could take it. Sarah's grip tightened on the mug, her knuckles pale. She wasn't the broken girl they'd discarded. She was a woman who'd clawed her way from nothing, built a life, a company, a legacy. But the past was a predator, and it was hunting her now. She turned back inside, the hardwood floor cool under her bare feet, and grabbed her phone. A text from Linda Carter, her fiercest ally, glowed on the screen. Don't let those vultures win, Sarah. You're tougher than nails. Sarah's lips twitched, a faint smile breaking through the storm. Linda was right. She'd survived worse than this. Much worse. But surviving wasn't enough anymore. She needed to fight. It was 2001, 4 years after David had thrown her out of their Pasadena home, leaving her with nothing but a soaked jacket and a broken heart. Sarah, then 32, stood outside Jimmy's elementary school in Glendale, her breath fogging in the crisp February air. She'd come every week for months, hiding behind a sycamore tree, hoping for a glimpse of her son. Today she'd gathered the courage to approach. Jimmy, now 11, burst through the school gates, his backpack bouncing, his laughter bright. Sarah's heart leapt. He was taller, his dark hair messy, but those hazel eyes, they were hers. Jimmy, she called, stepping forward, her voice trembling with hope. He froze, his smile fading. his eyes narrowing with confusion. Sarah knelt, her hands shaking. "Sweetheart, it's me, your mom." He took a step back, clutching his backpack straps. "Who are you?" His voice was small but sharp, laced with fear. "My mom's dead. Dad said so." The words hit like a sledgehammer. Sarah's breath caught, her vision blurring. "No, Jimmy, I'm right here," she whispered, reaching out. "I never left you." He shook his head, backing away. "Stop it! You're not my mom." His voice rose, drawing stares from other parents. A teacher approached, her face stern. "Ma'am, you need to leave." Sarah's legs buckled, but she stayed upright, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please," she begged, her voice raw. "He's my son." The teacher ushered Jimmy away, and he didn't look back. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, the world spinning, the weight of his rejection crushing her. Dead. David had told him she was dead. She was a ghost in her own son's life, erased by lies. That night she stumbled back to her Echo Park apartment, a 100-square-foot box with peeling wallpaper and a single bulb flickering overhead. She collapsed onto the thin mattress, the springs creaking under her weight. The room smelled of mildew and despair, a fitting tomb for her shattered hopes. She reached under the bed, her fingers closing around a small bottle. Sleeping pills, prescribed after sleepless nights of grief. She unscrewed the cap, the pills spilling into her palm, their white surfaces gleaming like tiny moons. If Jimmy thought she was dead, maybe it was time to make it true. Maybe disappearing was easier than living as a stranger to her own child. She sat on the bathroom floor, the tiles cold against her skin, and stared at the pills. Her breathing slowed, calm, resolute. This wasn't desperation, it was exhaustion, a quiet surrender to a world that had taken everything. The door crashed open. "Sarah!" Linda Carter's voice cut through the haze, sharp and commanding. She stormed into the bathroom, her curly hair wild, her brown eyes blazing. She took one look at the pills and slapped Sarah's hand, sending them scattering across the floor. "What the hell are you doing?" Linda shouted, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "You think this is the answer? You think David and that boy get to win?" Sarah blinked, tears spilling over. "He thinks I'm dead, Linda," she whispered. "My own son." Linda knelt, gripping Sarah's shoulders. "And you're gonna let him be right? You're gonna hand David everything on a silver platter? No, Sarah, you've survived too much to quit now." Her voice softened, but it was steel beneath. "You're not done. You're not disposable. You live. You hear me? You live. Better than they ever dreamed." Sarah sobbed, collapsing into Linda's arms, her body shaking with the weight of her pain. Linda held her, stroking her back, whispering, "You're enough, Sarah. You're enough." That night, something shifted. The pills stayed scattered on the floor, untouched. Sarah didn't sleep, but she didn't break either. Linda's words had nailed themselves into her soul. Live better than they ever dreamed. She would. She had to. The memory dissolved, and Sarah was back in her Santa Monica apartment, the morning light harsh now, exposing every line on her face. She set the mug down and grabbed her legal pad from last night, the name Rebecca Stein scrawled in bold ink. She dialed Rebecca's number, her fingers steady. The attorney picked up on the second ring, her voice crisp, professional. "Sarah, good to hear from you. What's up?" "I need a will," Sarah said, her tone firm. "Today. Everything, my money, my company, my properties, goes to the Rise Again Foundation. My son and ex-husband get nothing." Rebecca paused, then said, "That's a big move. You sure?" "Never been surer," Sarah replied. "Can you meet me at your office in an hour?" By noon, Sarah sat in Rebecca's sleek downtown LA office, the city skyline sprawling beyond the glass walls. Rebecca, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, slid a document across the desk. "This locks it in," she said. Your assets are protected. Even if Jimmy contests it, he won't have a leg to stand on." Sarah signed, her pen steady, the ink sealing her legacy. The Rise Again Foundation, her nonprofit for women survivors of domestic abuse, would carry her fight forward. She'd founded it 5 years ago, pouring her heart and profits from STI Global Trade into emergency housing, legal aid, and job training. It was her way of ensuring no woman would face what she had, alone, discarded, erased. As she handed the pen back, a weight lifted, but another settled in its place. Protecting her wealth was one thing. Protecting her peace was another. Sarah's journey to this moment had been a war, fought in the trenches of Echo Park's grimy diners and the fluorescent-lit classrooms of LA City College. After Linda's intervention in 2001, Sarah had made a vow to live for herself, not for the ghosts of her past. She enrolled in community college, juggling night classes with 12-hour shifts washing dishes at a Sunset Boulevard diner, her hands, raw from bleach and grease, typed notes on a borrowed laptop, her eyes burning from exhaustion. She studied accounting, then business, her mind soaking up every lesson like a sponge. Quitting wasn't an option, not when Linda's voice echoed in her head, "You're stronger than this." By 2004, Sarah landed an entry-level job as a data clerk at a small trading firm in downtown LA. The pay was barely enough to cover rent, but it was a step up from the dish pit. She wore second-hand blazers, her hair pulled back, and learned to navigate spreadsheets with a precision that surprised her bosses. At night, she enrolled in UCLA's evening program, majoring in international trade. She'd sit in lecture halls, surrounded by students half her age, scribbling notes until her wrist ached. Coffee was her lifeline, 1 cup stretched across 2 days, fueling her through chapters on global markets and supply chains. The grind was relentless, but Sarah thrived on it. Every late night, every sacrificed weekend was a brick in the wall she was building around her life. By 2010, she was a manager at the firm. Her salary tripled, her name respected, but she wasn't done. In 2015, at 46, she launched ST Global Trade, Inc., a trading company specializing in industrial goods. She started small, working from a rented office with a single employee. Herself, she cold-called clients, negotiated deals, and taught herself contract law on the fly. Her first big break came in 2017, a $2 million 0-cents contract with a Chicago manufacturer. By 2025, ST Global Trade was a powerhouse with offices in Chicago and Seattle, closing multi-million-dollar deals and earning Sarah a reputation as a titan in the industry. She'd bought her Santa Monica apartment in 2020, a sleek, sunlit space that felt like a fortress. She'd paid off her debts, bought a tailored suit that fit like armor, and stood in front of her mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. But the $800,000 0-cents redevelopment payout, announced just weeks ago, was the final validation. The city had seized her old Echo Park house, a crumbling shack she'd bought in 2002 when she had nothing, and turned it into a check. It was fate, she thought, remembering her suffering. A cruel, belated gift. But fate had a way of twisting the knife. Jimmy's call, followed by David's, proved the payout had painted a target on her back. Sarah wasn't naive. She knew David's history, his charm, his lies, his ability to bend the world to his will. He'd done it 28 years ago when he'd bribed a judge to win custody of Jimmy, painting Sarah as an unfit mother. She'd fought in court, penniless and powerless, her pleas dismissed by a system that saw her as a nobody. David had money, lawyers, connections. She had nothing but tears. Now, with her wealth and influence, Sarah had the power to fight back. She hired a private investigator, a former FBI analyst named Marcus Reed, to dig into David's past. Marcus was expensive but worth every penny. Within days, he delivered a bombshell. The judge who'd ruled against Sarah in 1997, now retired, had taken a $50,000 0-cents bribe from David, along with forged documents claiming Sarah was unstable. Marcus tracked the judge to a quiet life in Orange County, his son employed at one of Sarah's subsidiaries. Sarah didn't hesitate. She arranged a meeting at a small Pasadena diner, the kind of place where the coffee was bitter and the booths were sticky. The judge, Harold Grayson, was a frail man now, his hands trembling as he sipped his decaf. Sarah sat across from him, her navy suit crisp, her eyes cold. "I know what you did," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "The bribe, the fake reports. I can end your son's career with one phone call, or you can tell the truth." Grayson's face crumpled, his voice barely a whisper. "It was David's idea," he admitted. "He paid me. I needed the money." Sarah leaned back, a predator's smile curling her lips. "You'll sign a confession." "Today?" He did. Rebecca Stein compiled the evidence into a legal complaint, filing it with the California Judicial Review Board. The hammer fell fast. David, already a wreck, his life eroded by gambling debts, his mistress long gone, was summoned to court. Sarah attended the hearing, her tailored suit a silent declaration of her power. David, hunched and hollow-eyed, confessed to bribery and evidence tampering. The judge's voice was ice. 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, and $300,000, 0 cents in emotional damages to Sarah. As David was led away, he looked at her, his eyes pleading. "Sarah, I'm sorry," he croaked. She stared through him, her voice low. "Get used to ruin, David." "I did." But Jimmy was another story. Sarah's rage toward David was clean, sharp, a blade she could wield. With Jimmy, it was messier, tangled with love and loss. She hired Marcus to investigate him too, and the results were a gut punch. Jimmy, now 31, was a con artist, fleecing women across California with sob stories. A sick mother, a failed business, a foreclosure. 4 women had wired him tens of thousands, 2 believing they were engaged to him. He was a predator, a mirror of David's worst traits, harvesting trust like a crop. Sarah sat in her office, the folder open on her desk, each page a fresh wound. She didn't cry. She acted. She made copies of the evidence, mailing them anonymously to Jimmy's victims, with a handwritten note, "You deserve better." She filed a complaint with California's Financial Crimes Unit, attaching every damning detail. Within weeks, Jimmy was arrested, his face plastered across KTLA News, local man charged in multi-site fraud scheme. His reputation crumbled, his lies exposed to the world. Sarah watched the coverage on her laptop, her expression unreadable. Justice felt good, but it didn't fill the hole Jimmy had left. She closed the laptop and leaned back, the city lights twinkling beyond her window. Stay Global Trade was thriving, her legacy secure, but the victory was hollow. She'd won, but at what cost? 3 years later, in the spring of 2028, Sarah's phone buzzed again. She was in her office reviewing a contract for a new Seattle client when James Thompson flashed on the screen. Her heart skipped, a reflex she hated. She'd ignored his calls since his arrest, but something in the timing, 3 years, the length of his sentence, made her pause. She answered, her voice guarded. "Jimmy." "Mom," he said, his voice soft, cracked, nothing like the slick salesman of before. "I'm out. I know I don't deserve this, but I've changed. I swear. Can we meet? Just once." Sarah's fingers tightened around the phone. She wanted to hang up, to shut him out, but his tone, humble, raw, stirred something, not trust, not yet, but curiosity. "Venice Beach," she said. "The Blue Wave Cafe, Friday, 2 p.m. Don't be late, and don't lie to me." She hung up, her pulse racing. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew one thing. Jimmy would have to earn every inch of her time. Friday came, and Sarah arrived early at the Blue Wave Cafe, a cozy spot with scuffed wooden tables and the tang of salt air. She ordered a black coffee for herself and one for Jimmy, setting it across from her. At exactly 2 p.m., he walked in. He was thinner, his hair cropped short, his jacket faded. His hazel eyes, so like hers, met hers with a flicker of fear. He stood by the table, hesitant, then sat when she nodded. "Mom," he started, his voice hoarse. "I've been writing in prison. Letters I never sent. I know I was awful. I lied to you, to everyone. I want to be better." Sarah tapped her coffee mug, her face unreadable. "Words are cheap, Jimmy. You've got a lot to prove." He nodded, his hands trembling. She slid a hardcover notebook across the table. "Write in this," she said, "every week. Memories, truths, no excuses. If you're serious, I'll read them." He took the notebook, his eyes damp. "Thank you," he whispered. Sarah didn't smile, but she felt it. A tiny crack in the wall she'd built. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a start. Weeks later, Sarah learned Jimmy had joined the Rise Again Foundation as a volunteer, assisting with survivor intake. He hadn't told her, and that was what struck her most. He wasn't performing for her approval. He was trying to change. She visited the foundation's LA office, watching him from the back of a training room. He was clumsy but earnest, explaining forms to new volunteers, his voice steady. When he saw her, he nodded. No panic, just quiet acknowledgement. That summer, Jimmy surprised her again. He called, his voice nervous. "Mom, I found someone you used to know. Maria Gonzalez from Echo Park. She's in a Berkeley care home. I thought maybe you'd want to see her." Sarah's breath caught. Maria, her old neighbor, the fiery Latina who'd been her anchor in those dark years, always smelling of chili and laughter. They drove to Berkeley, the 2-hour trip silent but not tense. At the care home, Maria sat in a sunny garden, her face lined but her smile explosive. "Sarah Thompson," she bellowed, gripping Sarah's hand. "You're still a fighter, huh?" Sarah laughed, tears prickling. Maria turned to Jimmy, squinting. "You're the boy who broke her heart. Got some nerve showing up?" Jimmy didn't flinch. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm trying to make it right." They spent the afternoon there, Maria's stories weaving past and present. On the drive home, Sarah broke the silence. "Jimmy, there was a time I wanted to erase you. When you were 17, you saw me outside your house and closed the curtain. I thought, maybe I should let you go." He looked at her, his face calm. "Why didn't you?" "Because I couldn't," she whispered. "You hesitated just for a second before you shut me out. I held on to that." He nodded, his voice thick. "I was scared you'd leave. But you never did." The Rise Again Foundation's annual gala came in December 2028, held in a glittering Santa Monica ballroom. Sarah stood at the podium, her cream gown catching the light, her voice steady as she spoke about resilience. Jimmy, in a charcoal suit, took the stage next, his words simple but raw. "Rebuilding trust is the hardest road, but it's worth it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not just for him, but for every woman in the room who'd fought to rise again. After, they walked home under Santa Monica's moonlight, the air cool, the sidewalk silver. Jimmy carried his jacket, his steps sure. "I was nervous tonight," he admitted, "but I wasn't speaking just for me." "I know," Sarah said, her voice soft. "You spoke for every mother and son who's trying." He offered her his jacket, but she shook her head, smiling. "I'm not cold." They walked on, side by side, the distance between them no longer a chasm. Jimmy wasn't her shame anymore. He was her son, and she was his mother. Proud, at last, of the bond they were building, step by painful step,